Alright guys, Papa Pepper back once again here at the Abundant Harvest Homestead. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the #1 gardening skill for self-sufficiency. If you are going to be gardening, there is one skill that's going to allow you to be self-sufficient on a level like none other. I'm going to go with the simplest form of it because there's multiple ways of doing it. And it's not just simply planting seeds. A lot of seeds you can pick up a packet. It's got the directions on it. Does it like, full sun? Do you have to plant it a ½ inch deep? Whatever. And no matter how good of a gardener you are, you can't make the root go down and the stem and the leaves come up. You can't do that. That's in God's realm. All we can do is prepare soil. We can plant the seeds and we can do the best that we can, but we're not able to actually make that happen. Praise God, it works that way. Praise God, just by planting seeds, we can actually provide for our family. Definitely love that. To me, gardening is a very serious thing. I don't do it just for fun. Some years ago, probably 6-7 years ago back in Wisconsin, a friend said, "Wow, you really like gardening, don't you?" And I looked at him and I said, "I eat food." The simplest reason that I garden, the main driving factor, is the fact that we eat food. And this is a great way to provide healthy, nutritious, fresh food for our family in a very cost-effective and simple way. And also what I'm going to talk about in this video is a great way as well to save a ton of money. Gardening already saves a ton of money. Just buying the seeds versus having to pick up all that produce at the store. Incredible how much money you're going to save. But by doing what I'm going to talk about, it'll also save you money like never before for years and years and years to come. So the main way to sit there and extend your gardening, become kind of on that next level of a gardener, is plant propagation. There's many ways to do that. There's taking cuttings, there's grafting, there's layering or air layering, and the simplest way is just saving your own seeds. Many years ago, well, probably back in 2016, I bought a number of these seeds. It was probably about that many. These are mosaic long bean seeds. It probably cost me about $3 or $4 for that small handful of seeds. These days, I mean, here's a ½ pint jar full that are ones that we just have from last year. There's more than that laying around too in the house. But the thing is because I learned how to save seeds, I can take my initial investment and all of a sudden I can wind up with more and more and more every year. You wouldn't think about just this one seed being planted can make, one plant that can produce probably 20 of these seed pods. Each of those seed pods could easily have 10 seeds in it each. All of a sudden from planting one seed, you've got 200. Well, if you plant those 200, you can get a lot of food and a lot of leftover seeds, and if I don't need to plant these, I could still use them as a bean, much like you would with other dried beans. So pretty much most plants have a life cycle. Most plants have things like flowers. Okay, this is actually my first time in my life actually having this type of flower in my garden. These are kale plants, and they're kale plants from last year. Coming from the north up in Wisconsin, our kale wouldn't really last till its second year up there. There were a number of biennial plants or perennial plants that would come back year after year, or every other year in some cases, but they wouldn't really last through the winter where they would do this. The kale would definitely die out. So for me to have planted this last spring or late last winter and then had it go through spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, and now heading back in towards summer, it's actually at this point flowering. So most plants have a life cycle where eventually they mature and they put out a flower. When those flowers are fertilized, they start working on seed pods. I'll give you a closer view of this. So here you can see the flowers, and as they're getting fertilized, some of them are falling down to the mulch, and these little seed pods are being created. Eventually these seed pods will dry and there'll be a number of tiny little balls inside them. Those tiny little balls are going to be some seeds. And by planting those seeds, then I'll be able to grow more kale. Same thing here. These are actually onions that we left in the ground so they could go to seed. So these onions right now have these cool little balls, and I think these are purple onions like you'd pick up at the store, but they're now flowering, and soon that's going to turn to seed. A number of different plants that we commonly grow in gardens, people are used to picking up the seed every year and then sowing it, or sowing the rest of the packet you didn't do the first year. That's perfectly fine, and that's great. And right now it's not too difficult to go to the store or go on the internet and order a packet of seeds. It's really not, or to pick one up and purchase it there at the counter. But one thing you got to remember is that may not always be the case. Rather recently, in a number of places, even in the United States, it was illegal for certain stores to sell seeds. They were considered non-essentials. And from a homesteader, a gardener mindset, I think that's totally pathetic, that you can stand there in a line next to a bunch of people and pick up subpar food that'll last you a couple of days, and then you got to come back and buy more, rather than picking up a packet of seeds to the point that you may never need to buy that seed again, and you'll be able to go to your own garden alone or with your family and just harvest your food. That's the way I like doing it anyway. That's the way people used to do it. To consider that non-essential is just crazy. I'm gonna back this up just to give you a shot of this quick. If you look in front of me here, this is one of those crazy things where you've got these probably almost 4 foot tall onion plants. There's a number of 7 little flower heads that are starting just from one little ball section of onions. Those onions just didn't get big enough to make sense harvesting the other year, so I left them in the ground. I figured, hey, maybe next year they'll go to seed, and then I'll have onion seeds. A lot of times we grow our onions from sets. We can pick up little baby miniature onions at the farm and feed store, put them in, grow our onions. Excellent. It's cheap, it's easy, but you can also grow them from seed, and there may be times when I'm not able to get my onion set. So if I have seeds on hand, that's going to be a lot better for me, and then I get to see super cool things like this going on too. So panning down from these onions, we've got an aronia bush, and then this is a bunch of dill here. And dill is one of those that if you do not harvest it all, because a lot of times people put the stems and the seed heads in with their dill pickles or something, but if you don't harvest it all, some of those seeds are going to fall back to the soil. That's what I did here last year. And now we've got all this dill just kind of reseeding itself. If you look, I even had some out in the pathway. This is technically on the walkway, another one here, out of my raised bed. But it just kind of reseeded itself there, so there it lies. Over here, I think we've got some arugula, and you can see that it is going to seed now too. No matter how much seed I try to collect from these, I'm probably going to miss some, and it's probably going to fall back to the ground, and then it'll reseed itself here under this apricot tree and this wild plum tree, and just kind of come back for years to come if I allow it to. And in a situation like this is Burnet. It is a green from over in the UK or something. I got some seeds from Baker Creek, rareseeds.com. 3 of the plants overwintered here in my garden, and now they are all forming these seed heads. They're getting past their little flowers. They're forming these little seed heads, and I'm gonna have more than enough Burnet seeds for years to come. Here's some of the ones that I planted this spring, just because I figured these would complete their life cycle and go out. And that's one thing too, is if you allow a plant to reach maturity, all it's trying to do in its generation, a lot of times, is to make some seeds. Oh wow, a lot of pollen there. Make some seeds so that next generation can get started, and then it's free to pass away. So a lot of times people will be cutting back plants to make sure they don't bolt, that they don't go to seed. But if you want to save your own seeds, you're going to have to let a couple of the plants, and often it'll be your best plants. So if you have those plants that are out competing other plants, if you have that one plant that looks absolutely amazing, it's putting forth the biggest fruit, it's putting forth the most fruit, it's the biggest leaves, it's the most pest tolerant, it's the one that when everything dried up, it was the one that was still alive. Those are the ones you're going to want to save seed from, because those are your toughest, strongest plants. And if you do that year after year after year, what you do is you wind up with a seed for a plant that's much more accustomed to your growing area. A lot of the seeds in our garden come from a number of sources. One of my favorite though is rareseeds.com. It's Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company. See, they're up across the border in Missouri, and they've got a little colder growing climate than I do here. So some of the things that they grow, you know, it's pretty much the same area, but as I save my own for years to come, I wind up with one that's better adapted for my specific area. And by learning how to, you know, save our own seeds, then we don't need to buy them again either, which is really nice. It works out well for us. And then we have some, you know, to plant ourselves, to share, to sell, to bless others with, to barter, to trade, to whatever it may be. Here's a good example too. A lot of people are rather familiar with growing peas. Last year we tried about 6 different variety of peas. One of the best peas that worked for us was the Wandos, and I really didn't even eat any of the peas. What I did is I let them all fully develop. A number of peas people will pick when they're young. Take these little guys, use them in a stir fry, or eat them raw on like a vegetable platter or something like that. You can also let them completely fill out. Here you can see that it's starting to get all those little bumps. All those little seeds are coming in. And remember, the peas are actually seeds. Now we eat them when they're still green and immature and they're moist. But if we let this completely dry out, all these will be like little rocks almost. They'll be the actual seeds like we planted. And then even to replenish, you know, this row is only maybe 10 or a dozen plants. Well, if I save 2 of these, I've got more than I planted. So it's easy to get back what you put into something and then have all that excess to enjoy as well. And then remember, you know, the greens from these can be used as a fodder for animals. Feed them to our rabbits or our sheep, or add them to the compost. You know, everything gets used. But with seed saving, then I never need to buy seeds again for that specific one I'm saving them for. And actually here you can see there's peas, there's peas, there's peas, there's peas, there's peas, there's peas, there's peas. In a lot of these areas, that's more peas. I planted all those peas that I saved, and then what's going to happen is these are going to eventually fizzle out. They're all getting to the point, you know, where they're putting their stuff out now. And once they're done, then I can grow other plants in the same place that they were. And I can get multiple harvests off the same trellis. You can see here already, I've got snake gourds coming in. Where'd he go? Ah, right there. Okay, I knew there was one here. So right in the middle here, you have a snake gourd coming in. That's this guy here. His first big leaf's coming up here, and he's going to come up and over surpass these. So the peas are not enough to prevent him from coming in, and as he comes in, he'll get up and over them. They'll still be able to produce their peas, live their life cycle. We'll save some of the seeds, we'll eat a lot, then we'll thin out those peas, and this whole trellis will once again be covered in snake gourds just like 2 years ago. Last year we grew the Chinese red noodle beans here. This year we'll be growing snake gourds again like 2 years ago. And this is a good example too. Here's a raised bed where we have strawberries as a ground cover, and we're growing muscadine grapes above them. But while those things are doing their thing, I can run some peas up in the middle of there, and they're doing just fine. So I can get 3 different harvests off of one raised bed. This is another example of just like that dill back there, where our cilantro had gone to seed, and as I was grabbing it, some of it fell here in kind of part of the area I'm still working through. So there's the raised bed I grew it in last year. Here's all this cilantro coming up on its own. We had some the other year that actually made it through the entire winter. Most of the plants died, but a couple of them were still alive. So those were the ones that we allowed to go to seed last year. So these are going to be better and more cold hardy plants than some of the other ones. And it's not that hard. You know, I'll show you with the salad quick here. But these guys, if you just let a couple of them grow, eventually they'll flower and then they'll seed. And when that seed gets dried, you can save it. And you can plant your own, or let some of it reseed itself too. So this here is one of the salad areas of our garden. We've got some nice long kind of red one. We've got some oak leaf lettuce, I believe. And then we've got some purple lady bok choy. Purple lady bok choy is a small bok choy. It's very beautiful plant, nice purple leaves. But you can see here, we are letting it flower and go to seed. The same thing is going to happen with some of this lettuce, where I'm not going to cut it all back. I'm going to let a certain area of it grow. Eventually it'll bolt, it'll get really tall, and it'll put forth, much like that kale, much like this, some little flowers and then seeds. So some of this stuff too almost look like broccoli. I mean, as it starts with those little clusters, because with broccoli, you're doing the same thing. You're just eating really the florets, those flower heads, before they bloom and go to seed. We can eat them as broccoli, or if you got one really good plant, you can sacrifice that plant. And I say sacrifice because you're giving up the harvest of it for food this year, but then in the future, you're gonna have that much more potential because you're gonna be able to save all those seeds. To me, it just makes so much sense to do the best you can with what you got, but then let some of it live on for the future. Here's a good example of cilantro. This cilantro, compared to me, is over my waist high. I'll let this one grow up all the way, so you've got this big, tall plant, and it's about to flower here. And once it flowers, then I'll have more cilantro seeds. I've actually got a big baggie of cilantro seeds, but my wife loves that stuff. She certainly appreciates it. She's glad we've got it, and I want to keep being able to grow it without having to buy more cilantro. Therefore, we just let that grow up, and then we save our own seeds. I'll show you something over here too with the carrots. This is a very similar situation where over my waist height, I've got a carrot that we let overwinter. And now it's about to put out some flowers. So carrots, like some other ones, are going to be a second year kind of crop for seed. Where if you leave them in the soil, they'll go to seed the second year. That's what happened with our onions. They're just going to the next stage of their life cycle. So this carrot here, that one carrot I left in is going to give me hundreds of carrot seeds. To me, that is absolutely fantastic. To me, it's not that hard to skip over one carrot. In farther north zones, you may have to kind of heavily mulch it to protect it from the winter. And then that second year, you'll be able to get the flower head. We used to in Wisconsin, and I would add all of my leaf litter from the yard. I'd take all my leaf litter from the trees. I would add that to the garden at the end of the year to kind of cover it, till it in the spring. We don't till here, but it would allow those carrots to overwinter. And I think there's also a way to kind of force them to go to seed in 1 year. I've never personally done that, but as you can tell, there's a great deal of variety in this stuff. There's a great deal of different things with different plants. I know I kind of am excited and I'm fast-paced about this, but I'm just giving you a small example of how if you learn how to save your own seeds, you'll be able to do some of this stuff and never need to buy it again. Here's a great example. I'm actually standing over here where these peas are growing first, because that's what I like to do. There's also a ton. Okay, peas, move down. This is actually my Malabar Spinach Bed. These young guys are starting. The first year we had them, we had about 12 or 14. That was 2 years ago. And they covered this fence, and we really couldn't keep up with harvesting them. But we liked them, so we let them go to seed. In the tropics, they are a perennial plant. They just live through the winter. But here, they can reseed themselves, and then you've got all these seedlings coming up. So I don't even really need to save these seeds. This is going to be the third year in a row that I'm harvesting this bed. I only planted it once. And at this point, in fact, there's a bunch growing outside. I've got a thin, which means I can give them to my friends. And if you don't want this problem, I don't consider it to be a problem, because I just keep lifting them out with my little shovel here and blessing others with them. But if you don't want this problem, then just don't let them go to seed. Break off those seed heads as they start. So in this case, I actually don't even need to save them in my house. I just let them fall on the ground, let them do their thing. They come back on their own. And I have saved the seeds because I let them go to seed. And now I never need to worry about planting that plant again. So this is our garden. We're not going to be 100% self-sufficient unless things get really bad and there is no other option. But we're trying to be more self-sufficient. We're trying to save more of our own seeds. We're trying to do things that make sense where we have a very cost-effective way to get as much food possible. I guess this is one last good example. If you see this is asparagus. Right now, this is a female plant. It's covered in little green balls. Well, those balls will eventually turn red, and they'll have little seeds in them. And they're actually those little red berries, those balls are actually poisonous, but they're full of seeds. So I'm gonna have all those asparagus seeds that I'll be able to spread out in my bed and get a whole lot more asparagus coming in there. Which to me, again, just absolutely awesome because I'm not gonna have to buy crowns again. A couple of those were gifted to us, which is awesome as well. But I'm not gonna sit there and have to continually buy crowns, and because I plan on being here for a while on this property, they've got plenty of time to grow from seed. So guys, hopefully that helps. Hopefully that inspires some of you. Hopefully that's a little bit to think about. A lot going on here, a lot going on in the world, a lot more people concerned about their food supply, a lot more people taking the stewardship of that into their own hands. And do a little research. I've got some layering I could show you guys there too. Some different plant propagation methods we're doing. But if you're able to sit there and claim stewardship over your food supply in a way that few people do these days, you're going to set yourself up to be a lot more secure and a lot more, self-sufficient, where you don't need to rely on others, and that adds to your security. To me, I don't think it's a small thing that I have a number of little peppers under my care that I have to provide for, and therefore it drives me and it pushes me to do things like save my own food, like make sure nothing goes to waste, like do the best thing, for the security of my family, and being able to save our own seeds, to garden like our lives depend on it. So I will talk to you guys later. Hopefully that blessed you guys. If you got more questions, comments, concerns, things like that, let me know in the comment section below. I'll see you next time. Papa out.